Hello and welcome to the Problem Gambling Podcast. I'm Barry Grant, an addiction counsellor with Extern Problem Gambling. And my co-host is Claire Donegan, the project lead on the Women's Gambling Support Network. And she's also doing a master's in addiction counselling and psychotherapy and all that good stuff at the moment. And our guest today is Daniel Coulter, but we'll be calling him Dan for the purposes of today's show. And he is a pre-accredited psychotherapist in private practice at Serenity Therapy. If you want to check that out, he's 6 years in recovery after a 10-year gambling addiction, or just coming up on 6 years. We'll allow you the 2 days grace. Dan, listen, thanks a million for coming on and joining us today. I suppose the first question I ask nearly everybody is like, how did you get into gambling in the first place?
And thank you very much for having me on, Barry and Claire. I suppose for me, the first starting point, there's just, I suppose, before I even placed my first bet, I remember being in fifth year, say 15, 16 in secondary school, and there'd been a buzz around Cheltenham. And that would have been the first maybe exposure. Now, I knew nothing about gambling at all at that stage, or I'd really not grown up in it or anything like that. But I remember, we were allowed to go downtown for lunch, and there was this buzz around the place, of lads, yeah, 16, 17, talking about Cheltenham. I think it could have been around the time it was Cato Star, Denman, and it was, who was going to win. And there was some lads inside the bookie shop and some lads outside the bookie shop, but that would have been my first I suppose that I can remember like exposure to it. There was a buzz around that, and that was, as I said, that would have been 16, 17, say. I would have. I suppose the first bet I would have placed was on a football accumulator. It was a coupon. Remember being in the bookie shop and went in with a few others, hadn't a clue what I was doing, but picked a few teams and went home and watched it. And it was Gillette Soccer Saturday. I think some people will be aware. Watching the kind of scores and I suppose the worst thing that ever happened was that one. So it was like a €5 accumulator. I think there was five teams, and there was a late goal to seal the win. And I remember, I suppose, after that, day of being like, this is, how easy that was. And I can't remember exactly. It was like 110, €120 back, something in around that region, back off the €5 bet. And that's, I suppose, was the starting point around, first exposure really to gambling.
Yeah, yeah, and that's fatal, when you have a big win or significant
Yeah.
win on the first bet or one of the first bets. That's usually, as you probably know from your own work, a recipe for disaster, and it's in that pathways model of gambling addiction, an early big win, like
Yeah.
it's so significant to so many people. And sorry, what age were you at that stage?
I'd say it was 17, 18. I'd say, yeah, it was in around, I was approaching adulthood anyway. And I remember off the back of that, like, I didn't, it wasn't that I was straight away then the next day or was the next, when was the next one I could get on. But I know over time, I so I went to college for a short spin in Dundalk, didn't like the course, so I got out of that course and I ended up working full time. So I had a full time wage, coming into my hand, living at home at 18. And that's where the kind of the start of the Saturdays going in and doing a football accumulator on a Saturday. And that's where that started, I suppose. That kind of then once I had I suppose money and go in on my lunch break or this kind of became to be others as well in work that I'd be talking about bets that they were going to be doing. So there was a kind of again a culture around this kind of a thing. I wasn't the only one going up on my lunch break from the shoe shop I was working in Avon to place a bet. But so that would have been then where it became like a Saturday thing, I suppose, again at the in the early stages.
Yeah, so many people have spoken about Soccer Saturday on the podcast and in counselling sessions, and
Yeah.
I've probably repeated myself here, but I worked in bars for a long time, and I
Okay.
could never understand Soccer Saturday. It was just like, why is this 2 hours of absolutely boring crap on the television of
Yeah.
people watching people watch football games that you can't see? And
Yeah.
then when I started kind of working in this area around gambling addiction, I understood why Soccer Saturday exists. Right?
Yes.
It exists
Yeah.
for people with football accumulators. to sit there and watch the different results coming in and the goals coming in, and that's it. That's my
Yeah.
practice. It's and people really miss it. You know, when people stop gambling, like they they miss that early stage of doing my 10 or 5 or
Mm.
whatever accumulator, watching soccer Saturday. It was a ritual, it was part of their kind of weekend routine for a lot of people. So it's interesting to hear that coming up again.
Yeah.
How, what age do you think you were when the gambling became problematic or an addiction?
Yeah, and it's an interesting one, I suppose. Like I remember, as I said, the routine and the rhythm of being 18. I had a good few friends as well that were into horses, that either trained horses or were involved with a horse, whatever like that. So I remember that was something then that I became interested in. And my first ever holiday, where people go off on J1s and stuff, my first ever holiday was me and 13 or 14 other lads going to Galway races for the week. And that was the first really kind of big holiday. And I know when I came back from that, I suppose there was a shift. I got a real interest in the buzz, the whole horse racing side of things. So that then became a part of the gambling sequence, so to speak. And I know that my mother would have had concerns. She would have come in on occasions. I was there maybe 18, 19, sitting in my sitting room with the blinds down with a couple of my friends, all on our laptops and flicking between the racing and the football. And I know she would have had conversations around it, in front of me, in front of my friends, talking about the dangers of this. This isn't, normal behavior for young lads. And of course, it fell on deaf ears. I was like, yeah, man, whatever, it's grand. It's only a bit of crack. So she even would have, back in the days when you used to get bank statements in the post, you have to order them now, I think, but it's all online. But I remember she went through and seen one of them, and there was a deposit, down along for a betting company, well-known one, and yeah, and I meant to say there as well, I suppose where I would see the progression for me would have been when I opened up the online account. And again, it wouldn't have taken too long when I realized that, well, I don't have to be traipsing up here to the bookie shop on my lunch break. I can do this off my phone or my laptop, very, very quickly. And you can pick a range of different bets as well. There's so much more options, I suppose, with the online setup. So, but yeah, I remember her having again conversations with me. I think though, where I would have seen that it progressed for me was when I went back to college and I was down and I went to college. I'd done a year in Cavan that linked on to Athlone doing social care. And I remember mum giving me like, I'd have my grant money, but mum would give me money for shopping. And I remember my mindset at that stage, and that would have been, say, 19 going on 20, was, oh, sure, with that money I could go and I could make, I had this already in this mindset, this world of I can make more money with this. I know more than the bookies. So I'd go in and I'd go in with my shopping bags into the local shop in Cavan. And the amount of times that I came out of that bookie shop with no money and the shopping bag's empty going home. And so I think that would have been around the time that it was problematic. The mindset had changed to I had this idea that I could make more money, that this was nearly like, I'd have a free week, this kind of language that I'm sure you're familiar with, free week in college or a free night out and a free college night out, this sort of stuff on the bookies' money. And that, that's when I suppose the likes of the lies of manipulation come in because I'd have no money then. So I'd be, starting to make up things to mom, or there's something else, going on. I might need a college book, whatever it may have been. But to without saying what it was that actually had happened. So that's where I can see, from that kind of age of 20 onwards, I was yeah, I was definitely in trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it progressed quite quickly there. But yeah, I mean, that thing of thinking that you're better than the bookies or that you're smarter than the bookies is dangerous. And like I think one of the things we often see is this kind of exceptionalism belief, like that everybody knows that the bookies make a profit every year, therefore there are more losing bets than winning bets, and everybody
Yeah.
knows that most people who gamble are losing more money than they're winning, but I'm the exception. I'm
Yeah.
the special one. I'm not knocking you here because everybody does it, but
No.
I've done this shit in my own life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A huge team, Barry, I think for me around this was identity.
Mm.
So gambling gave me this identity. I became then, oh, Dan's good for a tip. Dan has, oh, give him a message. And like I get a great kick out of giving somebody a winner, but I never tell them about the other 10 bets that I had on that I lost. But there was definitely a kind of an ego part in this kind of, I fed into this character of Dan who's, in the know and was involved in a good few, racing circles and yeah, lapped all that up, and it definitely there was an identity piece in this for me, 100%. As you're kind of saying there, and then again, we have a culture around this stuff. Bash the bookies. There's a we yeah, there's a lot of the terms that we'd use. Playing with the bookies' money. There's a lot of these different terms that we use in society, and as I said, yeah, I fed into all of them and beyond. Yeah,
Yeah, and the status thing is important because I've worked with a lot of people over the years who are like the go-to person, say in their friend group or in their workplace. Cheltenham's on. Ask Dan, who he fancies in the Gold
yeah,
Cup or
yeah,
whatever. And there's a status in that, there's a nice feeling that goes with that. Like I'm the go-to guy or the
mm,
go-to girl for this information. And then it's like that if you want to, you give them a winner and then, obviously they value you for that because they're getting free
yeah,
money
yeah,
off the bookies. Thanks very much. So yeah, that's status thing, and then that's a challenge for people in recovery because when you stop gambling, a lot of people don't tell all their co-workers that they stopped gambling or why they've stopped gambling.
yeah.
So then Cheltenham rolls around, they're going, "All right, John, have you any tips for Cheltenham?" And they're like, "Well, I'm off a bet." "Oh, why are you off a bet?" And then the whole
Yeah, yeah,
thing
yeah.
around that. People approach it in different ways. Some
Mm,
people kind of are very open about it. Some people have kind of white lies that they use to help them in their recovery. But that status and that identity piece is really important, and it presents challenges then when people are getting into recovery.
yeah.
Claire, do you want to jump in there with some thoughts or questions?
As you're talking, I feel like there's so much I relate to in your story, and we have a lot of similarities in our journeys there, Dan. We're the same age, and our addictions were the same length and everything. So, and I would have done the same, bookies and all that kind of thing. But I know that your article came out last week,
Mm,
where you told your story, and I was reading through it, and there's so much that I found really interesting. And there's one piece in it, and it says, as his addiction progressed, Dan started to withdraw socially with feelings of stress and anxiety becoming more and more prevalent in your life. And like that is what the experience of being in that addiction is like. You're constantly paranoid, and you withdraw in case maybe you owe money that you can't pay or whatever it is. Like you're hiding
mm.
basically to feed that addiction and have no one bother you. But there's also you've mentioned not being present, how the gambling was all consuming, and this I found particularly interesting was you would protect your addiction at all costs.
At all cost. Yeah,
And this
yeah.
comes up a lot, I find, when when like loved ones get in touch, affected others, and they want to understand their child or their partner, whoever it is. And I try to explain this, that it's not a badness, but you will try and protect this addiction at all costs, whatever, because you do think that is the right thing to do. And I just think you really hit the nail on the head with that.
Yeah, and I suppose that the headline of that is that gambling was my first love. So again, and I say that like that was I would go to any lengths to protect that. Yeah, and you mentioned there about presence. Like I wasn't present for my 20s for most of it, not all of it. I wasn't. I was living in a different world, different land altogether. When I look back at, a lot of the damage that I caused loved ones, you referenced loved ones there, and it's a huge reason of, I suppose, why I think the article resonates not as well, is that like, there's so many people who are like collateral damage or get caught up in somebody's addiction. So presence, yeah, I don't think I was present at all for most of my 20s, and the yeah, protection, like, and that means the lying, the manipulation. It was like the Da Vinci Code or something. You're like, or something that you're just, yeah. I would make sure I'd protect this at all costs. I come up with any sort of a lie or any sort of a way to make sure that this doesn't stop. And as the article will go through, it's the things that I did, whether it be going to GA meetings for other people, going and seeing addiction counselors and having bets on the car before I go in, spoofing them for an hour and coming back out and checking my results. It was complete denial. The wall of denial was, it was a skyscraper high, and it was very much, yeah, I'd go to any length. Yeah, and I mean any length, and I'm not proud of an awful lot of the stuff that I did. And when I look back at it, I was like, it's just absolute insanity. And I know I'm not the first person, I'm sure, that's come on the podcast to say there's the insanity with addiction and the places that a person will go to protect it.
A temporary insanity, though.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I just, when I was going through it, I was just like, I really admire how honest you've been. Do you know what I mean? Because it's not an easy thing to do, to talk about all those things that you're not proud of
Mm.
doing, you know? There was another part where you mentioned where your mum was like really monitoring everything you were doing, and you would wait for her to leave, grab the car,
Mm.
go down to the bookies, make sure when you came back that the car was in the exact same spot that she
Yeah.
had left it in. That those are the lengths that you will go to, and it's just madness.
Yeah, yeah, I know absolutely. I could give you 100 stories more of that kind of thing of, as you mentioned, like the paranoia, and I was under surveillance at that stage, and that was due to debt, to theft, that I had to be bailed out with. That was why I was under surveillance. That you need to be keeping on the straight and narrow now. And yeah, I could give you a load of stories around that time and how long she'd be in the shops. Uh, and then also then as well driving at a not legal speed to get to the bookie shop. And I'd have a bet placed. By the time I left that bookie shop and got to the car, I'd have a bet placed, and I'd be watching the race while driving home. So like you can imagine, I'm driving at speed home, like the dangers for me and other people that could have been implicated. If I had a crash, and of course there would have been near misses on the road because I'm driving at speed to get back home while trying to drive and watch the phone to see if this horse or whatever it may be has come in. So, there's I could give you any amount of kind of the stories around that, but that was the length one, in regards to trying to protect that. And I would make sure when I'd leave the car, 'cause maybe it was a wet day, do you know what I mean? It'd be dry underneath it, or trying to put it back in nearly the same spot. And the amount of times that I would say I need to get petrol, that was my nearly go-to. Like I need to get petrol, or and I'd be gone for an hour, like just for me, like in the shop only up the road. So my mum would have known, and at times would have said stuff, but then at times as well, of course, exhausted with it all, and could see it. She could see it long before, long, long, long before I could ever see it, that this was a serious problem.
Mummies are great.
Mm,
Very.
And at what point, because you mentioned there that you were going to GA meetings and going to
mm.
counselling, but still actively gambling and, not being honest with the counselor, say, like, at what point did the penny drop and go, actually, actually, there is a real problem here. All these people around me who are telling me there's a problem are right, and I have been talking
Mm.
myself or deluding myself up to this point. Like, when did
Yeah,
that happen,
well,
or what happened to cause that?
yeah, well, unfortunately, like that took to COVID in 2020 to get to that stage. But I suppose, like within the realms of that, where things start to get more and more out of hand, um, like there was a lot of like there was theft. There was any amount of manipulation to get money out of people and borrow money. Um, like nothing that ended up in criminality. As I said, my mum twice bailed me out of debt, big debts, and thousands, like, and both of them occasions was right. We're not going to let this happen again. After the first time, it was I had a couple of months where I didn't gamble, came back home, Had no plan for so I basically I was working in I was vice president of the students union and president of the students union for 2 years in Athlone AIT at the time. So after that, I was back at home. I had no plan because I was just always, it was gambling was the number one thing. I had no real plan for what I was going to do next. I qualified, I'd done my course, whatever like that. So I was on social welfare for a little while, and it was that time then I didn't have access to money that I had in the past, and I was pissed off, boredom, all the warning signs were there. Poor me, feeling like shit, and went back at it. And I actually got a betting account reopened that I had told them I had a problem that they closed. Interestingly enough, as well, I'll just reference that, because I think that's an interesting part. But yeah, got that back open again through my manipulation, and great at being able to, what's the word, mediate on the phone. That was just, it's not, no, it's not really a problem, and I was a VIP customer with this firm, and was brought to on days out to the races. So you can well
Yeah.
imagine, without me
If you're a
going into
VIP
too much.
customer, there's a problem.
Yes,
That's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's your
Days
warning
out to
sign right
the
there.
yeah, days out to the races and all that. But anyway, so yeah, it wasn't until 2020, I suppose, that myself and my girlfriend, who had been with me throughout most of this madness, but and at the start it was all a bit of, seemed as a bit of fun. It was part of my identity, but there was never. But over time, like, of course, like anything, it was taking its toll on her too. And so when I say she bought a house in 2020, and I reference she because I didn't have money to buy anything, and that. But so we moved into the house in 2020, and COVID kind of hit then. So I think there was everyone, most a large percentage of the country were on the COVID payment, and they were at home. And my work situation was, yeah, kind of, it was yeah, I was kind of, was in work on and off, but it was like for everyone, we didn't know what was going on really. And at that stage, I was gambling on like anything, because there wasn't even any sport or really much on at all. It didn't really matter. It was just the process of it. But where it came to a head was, is I think, of course, I wasn't supposed to be gambling at all at this stage, and like, I was, I was putting betting slips into socks, into CD cases, trying to hide, and that, there was great lengths again. The lengths as my gambling progressed, and the more surveillance, and the more that I wasn't supposed to be gambling, that's where then the means and ends to keep gambling, became more creative, so to speak. Um, and things then come in like cash cards. I must just reference a couple of things quickly if it's okay. Just the
Yeah.
cash cards come in, so that would have been another huge one for me, because then my banks were under surveillance. But you're then, if you have cash cards, when I say cash cards for bookmaker shops, this is another way of being able to hide, what you're doing, what you're spending. So that was a huge one for me too. When I was in the process of not supposed to be gambling, but here are cash cards, and most of the big betting firms would have them. And yeah, so that was something. And then when Revolut came in, that was another killer as well. When Revolut came into play, that was another way of being able to have this other account that nobody knew about, and you could get friends to send you money. You'd give them the cash. I'd say, "Do you mind, geez, put money into Revolut there. Bank isn't working, or I lost my card." Any sort of fucking whatever story, and get someone to put money into the Revolut, and I'd hand them the cash or whatever. So all of these things would have played it. But anyway, sorry, I know I'm kind of going reverse, and I'm going forward and backwards there, but I do think it's important to kind of all the other tricks and ways around getting, being able to keep this a secret, I guess. But by the end of my gambling, I had no idea why I was even gambling. Like, as in, there was a period of time for a good few years where it was, I'm trying to make money here. It was nearly like this idea again of, that I know more, and like, I had so many fucking bad days, and I'd go to bed and my stomach, I'd be just close the blinds, head under the blankets, and the next day I get up and I just tell myself it was a bad day. It was amazing how quickly everything would just, we'd go again, kind of a thing. So by the end of it, I had no idea why I was gambling. and gambling again on cartoon stuff, whatever was on, whether it be casinos or cartoon racing or whatever like that. But I was actually gambling in front of my girlfriend at the time, now wife, Orla. She was on one couch, I was on the other, and it was clear as day what I was doing. You could see it just in my body movements and my facial expression, the stress I was feeling internally. And that's where the she was like, I can't do this anymore, And I don't know to this day of whether or not that was a cry for help, because it was like the whole even, was it just that it grinded me down, the addiction had grinded me down so much they just didn't fucking care about, because these are the things that it does. It grinds and grinds and grinds away until there's fucking nothing left. I was a shell of a person. Self-esteem, had nothing nice to say about myself. It was complete and utter hatred for myself. So she had had enough and wanted me out of the house, and tried to plead with her. She's not. That's the first time that she said that she can't do this anymore. Taken away, and I thought I'd get round her, but no, she'd had enough. At that stage, and I ended up back at home then, and crying into the pillow. Um, and for I'd say a high percentage of my twenties as well, I was suicidal, like on and off. I had a suicidal ideation. That was prevalent, and it would have been very prevalent at that stage. Relationship is all intents and purposes gone. And my mother, of course, as well, completely exhausted with the whole thing of, she at times as well would have like given me money to fill a gap to pay bills so Orla wouldn't find out, so it was causing a huge friction within the family around things like that as well, of trying to keep things hush hush or whatever. So I had done an assessment in 2019 for a treatment centre called Hope House. It was like 2018, 2019, Hope House in Foxford. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but I done the assessment there, and of course, they take me when we went through the assessment. They were like, "Yeah, we take you," and I managed on the way home the car manipulate mum into being like, "Geez, I don't want to end up in a place like this. I'll do better now." All the and as well. So I didn't go in then, but my mother actually took my phone and rang the addiction counsellor that I had been seeing because she knew his name, found it on my phone, and rang him and was like, whatever was said there, you can imagine what was said on the phone from my mum's side. But anyway, through all that, I managed to get a place in Hope House, in Foxford, and that was in August 2020. And I had my last bet. I said it was the 20th of June, 2020. Uh, so yeah, and that's where then, I know I've got a long way around answering your question, but that's where I ended up. And I suppose I went into that treatment program with two things in my mind. One was this isn't going to work for me because I didn't think there was anything that would work for me. And I also, I suppose, I had through my gambling two plans to end my life, down through the years with gambling. But I had said to myself going into that treatment center, if this doesn't work, I'm definitely taking my life. It was like nearly this is the last saloon kind of thing or whatever going into to treatment. So I think I've gone a long way around answering the question, but I think I've answered it, have I? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's like when quite often when people reach out looking for help, it's when their nearest and dearest have just reached breaking
yeah,
points. They've done the bailouts, they've done all the slips and the relapses and all the lies and the manipulation, and they just get to a point where, as much as they love you, they just cannot take it anymore. And quite often that's the trigger to get people to seek help.
mm,
It's the big one. And it's horrible for everybody involved, but like that's usually the thing that gets people to wake up for a minute and go, hang on, the thing that's at stake is not the money in my pocket or the money in my bank account. It's these really important relationships, right? I can
yeah,
replace money. I can work. I can pay off debts. I can replace money. I can't replace my
yeah,
spouse or my partner or my parents or my siblings or these other
mm,
important people that have reached breaking point and that are just ready to just cut ties with me. Right? That's usually the big thing that people could start thinking a bit more clearly about the consequences of their
mm,
gambling.
yeah. And treatment, I suppose that's part of the treatment process. Family are involved. Now it was a different scenario because it was COVID time, so family weren't actually able to come on site, but they all got to fill out questionnaires and they were read out in group by other members of group residents that were in the house. And like that. Even as I talk about now, I can shivers around the I suppose the length of, if like that was going on 10 years, you can imagine how much that they've gone through over a large part of that period. So that was, yeah, that was the first time I think that I really, um, that it really hit home. Because of course I've seen my mum upset saying this needs to stop. As in the article, it's referenced that I stole nearly €9,000 from my brother, my youngest brother. I'm the oldest of three. Um, like, so there was a lot of damage that was done in relationships, and you referenced there as well around the wake up call. I do wonder. Um, I never had felt any responsibility. For, say, for example, theft or anything like that. There was always the money was replaced, and I was getting away with it all, and I nearly, I didn't care. There was that selfish, part of me that was like, I'm like getting away with all this. Why would I stop? Kind of a thing. But in treatment, it was really, it hit home as to the damage that was done, and was caused by my gambling, and was read out in I said, in a group setting. Yeah, and that's really the first time where I kind of was like you've done, there's a serious amount here, that and the impact that it's had on others. And I think that that's part of the reason why I brought out the article, and I do, speak about it a lot, that there's a huge amount of impact on others. And I don't, you can say it affects five or six. Like, there's different kind of things of, well, it impacts six or impacts eight. It depends how big your bloody family is, how big your circle is. Do you know what I mean? You can't kind of say that it's just five or it's just six. There's a huge amount of people who can be implicated over time by somebody's addiction, regardless of what it is. But yeah, it was the first time that I really was like, fuck. What have I done, kind of a thing. That's the truth of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and everybody I've ever talked to who's been through residential treatment says family day is is the toughest and probably the most, in some ways, the most meaningful, because it is that harsh dose of reality when you're coming out of that dream world of being an active addiction and going, okay, this isn't just about me and me and my bubble and
Yeah.
me being up in my head. It's like all these other people who I care about have been usually very badly
Yeah.
impacted by my
100%.
addiction, by my behavior. Claire, were you going to come out with something there?
No, it's true. It's probably the hardest part to look at. We don't want to at the time. I was speaking with someone recently who went up as the family member to do that in the Rutland Centre, and it did give that person the platform that they needed to just say all the stuff they couldn't really say before, because they felt like they were walking on eggshells, and that's the hard part and the hard position for people who are the loved ones, because as you've mentioned a lot of the time, Daniel, manipulation is a big part of this addiction, and there's a lot of threats made, if to, like you'd mentioned, the suicidal ideation, that kind of thing. And loved ones are terrified to confront you, because that's where you will go straight away. I'm not saying you personally, but it does happen a lot of the time. If you try to step in and help this person, they use that against you. So
Mm.
what these family days can do is just give that platform where that manipulation can happen in that public arena. And I can see the value in it completely. And I have never done residential. A lot of people don't, but I can definitely see where the value comes from in that.
And just as you're saying that as well, it's the first time, like when you're in that setting where you actually have to listen.
Mm.
So a lot of the time, of course, my family were trying to speak to me, and again, I was trying to protect this, and I would get defensive, I get verbally aggressive. That was my form. It was like, I throw it back at you 10 times fucking harder, and upset people, that kind of way, just to get them off my back. So like that's the setting of in that treatment environment of where, like, you have to listen. You sit there. It's their turn to speak. It's their time and their opportunity to use their voice. What it was like for them. Yeah.
That's really important because, yeah, so as you touched on earlier on, like for every person with a gambling problem, there are many multiples of the person who are adversely impacted. And of
Yeah,
course, the services tend to be focused on just the individual with the addiction rather than the many, many, many more people whose lives are impacted by that
100%.
addiction, which isn't fair, really.
Mm.
Um, I mean, in terms of, okay, so you're 6 years in recovery or in 2 days' time as we're recording this, what would be the most important thing that for you that helps you to stay in recovery? Obviously, you had that, short, sharp shock of, I think Hope House is 28 days.
Yeah, so it
So,
was 30 days or whatever, and that so I came out of Hope House, and for me I owe a lot to it, and again I come from a place of we shouldn't knock anything that helps people to stay well, whatever that is. So whether it be the rooms with GA meetings, whether it be treatment, whether it be whatever, cancer psychotherapy, whatever the support is, if it helps people to stay well, that's where I sit on this, because, um, I owe a lot to Hope House, and to what they did for me, and I always say it was like a reset. It gave me there was just like the fog was lifting, but that's where the real work kind of starts too, that kind of way of how am I going to keep myself kind of well. So when I came out, like the first day I came out of treatment, the first time I seen a bookie shop, I bawled my eyes out. I bawled and I bawled and I bawled in the car, and it was in, I think, in Westport. One was on the main street there, and I was in the car, and I couldn't stop crying. And it was just, I think I was connecting with two things. I was connecting with what it had done to me, but also as well the fact that there was grief attached to it as well. Yeah, and I think that is something that isn't really spoken about. Maybe is the grief of, if you've loved something. And then there's this, it might sound crazy to some people, but there is a grief attached to whatever it was that was the life that you had before. Yeah, yeah. And so that was, and you referenced it earlier on there in regards, the risks attached, for people then in recovery, especially in the early stages. So they say when you come out of treatment, people, places and things. So I was involved in so many different circles, and WhatsApp groups with tips. You were mentioning there about Cheltenham, and if you're known as the guy. Now, funny enough, over the last couple of years of my gambling with the isolation withdrawal, I withdrew for most. It was, and I suppose I wasn't supposed to be gambling, so I couldn't see to be when I'm around friends or anything like that to be speaking about this because I'm not supposed to be doing it at all. So I had already withdrawn from some, but when I came out, then I had to really look at well, five people who were sending me a message going, oh, Jesus, and that, odds, whatever, this kind of stuff in the early stages in particular, I needed to opt out of that. So I did need to kind of try and, I suppose, take myself out of different social settings, relationships, that were unhealthy. Um, Things like my phone, I got an app that banned any sort of gambling content on my phone. I had no access to money, so I had to get anytime I had wanted money, I had to ask for it, which was very challenging. Because it's like if I felt like a child, but it was what was needed at the time. And I'd have to keep a receipt then for whatever I would have bought. Yeah, and I had to rebuild my relationship with sport, yeah, as well, because and it's amazing as I sit here now, 6 years, like I love sport more than I ever did, and I'm very very grateful that that's the case for me because I know it's not the case for a lot of people, but Liverpool are my football team that I support, and like I never had any peace watching a match, because I'd have bets on it. Or any sporting event really. When I think of it, like any sporting event, nearly even ones I went to live, I never really. It was always the bet. It was always the now. Where actually I enjoy sport more now. Now, of course, in early recovery, I had to really watch what I was watching and how much and things like that. But I have a really, I have a really good relationship with it now that better than I ever did. I said I like watching like the World Cup's on now at the moment, and I enjoy that more than I ever enjoyed it. But sure, of course, betting ads are hitting you in the face every 2 seconds. There's some sort of an ad, so that's another side to all of it. But there was yeah, I think the thing I probably most of all though, I was in a very lucky position that when I came out of treatment, my family were there. Yeah. So my two brothers, my mum, and as I said, my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. Um, they're the people that I was very, very lucky in a privileged position that my relationships could be rebuilt. A lot of people who come out of whether it be a treatment or that, they don't have that opportunity to rebuild, relationships with people that they've hurt. And I was very, very lucky that they, sort of stayed by my side. They encouraged me with the article. There were, and they are of course implicated, and it brings up stuff, for everybody, and we all talk about it, openly around, what the article and doing podcasts and all that kind of stuff. But I'm very lucky that they were a huge part of my support as well in recovery. And I also started doing counseling psychotherapy, and I owe a great deal to two really good therapists that I had over that 5, 6 years, of being able to, I suppose, Hope House was the reset. I got to get honest with myself. I got to look at all the harm that it was caused. And it was in the aftermath of that then as well, of looking at what was going on deeper for me. What was going on maybe that was driving or fueling a lot of the addiction, with the gambling for me. And I done a lot of work through counseling psychotherapy, I suppose, to rebuild and, my life. And, without, I suppose, because I know we're limited for time here that as well, but I lost my dad when I was 10. He had a heart attack. He was playing a badminton final. Myself and Mam were at the match, and he took a heart attack and died in front of me. And I was 10. My brother was 8. My younger brother was 5. And I know, as I said, there was a lot of work that was done around, I suppose, I think I mentioned in the article, the kind of expression that you're the man of the house. So I had hundreds of people coming into our house and at the funeral home and everything saying, you're the man of the house now, you have to mind your brothers and your mother. And, that was a huge amount of pressure to put on a child, and then, of course, people that don't mean, they mean well, it's like, it's just something that's said, but there's a lot that kind of went on, the lack of a male role model. There was a huge amount that went on, for me, as a result of what happened, to my dad. And, that definitely played into, and I made reference earlier about that identity. Gambling gave me this identity. I didn't know who the fuck I was. I didn't know what, like, who or what I was, kind of doing. And I think gambling did give me that identity. And, I did a huge amount of work in psychotherapy after looking at a lot of what was going on, a lot of what the triggers were, and what was going on internally, I suppose, more so than anything as well, and there was a sort of huge trauma that had happened in my life. So just to kind of, I suppose, reference that too, that there was other things that had impacted me very negatively, through younger parts of myself. So yeah, so in the day to day now, is that I'm thankful that there's not too many triggers. I still will look for, say, there was a stag there recently. A friend of mine had a stag, and they were going to Galway to the Greyhounds. So I just decided to sidestep that. That's just one that I don't think, I said there was another one a few months ago, another stag. They were going to Galway races, and that, as I said, I miss. If you tell me one thing, if you were to ask me one thing that I missed from my gambling, it was probably going racing. To be honest with you, just not just there with the gambling, but also the buzz, the day out, with your friends. That's something I probably miss more than the most things. But I will still risk assess situations, and I'm strong in my recovery now that I can do that. That wasn't in early recovery. It's, I was doing that, but I felt there was so much more risk. Do you know what I mean? There was so much more things that could suck me back in. But yeah, that's kind of, I suppose, where I am. I still risk assess situations, but thankfully, I don't have compulsions. I don't have any need or feeling that I need to have a bet. And just again, I know I'm rambling here, but like recovery, I managed to give me my family back. I got married, and I have a 3.5-year-old daughter. So, do you know what I mean? And I have a bit of money in my back pocket, not much. And in the early stages of this profession, definitely not much. But I have an awful lot to be thankful for and grateful for, and I think at times that can get lost, but it's important to bring that gratitude back in, of where I've been. And it was the, counseling psychotherapy journey actually with one of my therapists who kind of encouraged me that, would you go and maybe I was kind of looking at pursuing something and doing something to look at myself. So it was kind of, what's the word, teased out in sessions about would you look at maybe going into the field. So I've done 4 years now in holistic counseling psychotherapy here in Athlone. I'm just finishing off a level 9 certificate in gambling addiction. And so I've set up my own practice. And the word was Serenity, it's called Serenity Therapy because I whatever about not the most religious person in the world, but the Serenity Prayer was something I could identify with. And through treatment, through recovery, through counseling psychotherapy, the word serenity, like, and you've said Barry reference, working with gamblers, there's anything but calm. There's anything but serenity for people whose brain and mind is like a washing machine, who's just, so preoccupied. And I felt that that word really resonated with me in regards to the calmness that's there now in comparison to all the madness that went before. Um, yeah, so that's I suppose where I'm at. Yeah, sorry, now I'm
No,
going
no,
on there,
brilliant.
but yeah.
Yeah, and like you've mentioned the trauma of your father passing
Mm,
in front of you when you're only age 10, and like for so many people, there is underlying trauma that drives the addiction, grief, and lots of other complex issues. Now, excuse me, there are also people who don't have underlying issues and just become addicted to a super addictive product. Like, that can
100%.
happen as well. But that's coming out of residential treatment, like what a lot of people do, unfortunately, is they don't go to their aftercare. Usually, there's 2 years of aftercare meetings
Yeah.
as part of your residential. A lot of those people will relapse, or they don't continue on working on themselves, say through counseling psychotherapy, as you have done as part of their recovery. They kind of see residential as one and done. I've done my month or I've done my 3 months out of school, where there you go, that's it. Fixed.
Yeah, 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 yeah. 28 days and it's yeah. No, I agree with you and like that as well, yeah. And there's a lot of people as well that go and have their bets on a Saturday or go and have their pint at the weekend and it doesn't become a problem too, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah, yeah. Like, I mean, you'd always say that. I mean, there are people who gamble in moderation, drink and use drugs, even illicit drugs in moderation. Fair play to those people.
Yeah, yeah,
A
no,
lot,
100%.
a lot of
Yeah.
people who just don't have an off switch,
Yeah.
and if they're one of those people like me with certain things,
Yeah.
stay away from the thing, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Can I just say that they coming out and I suppose and bringing out the article and part of the reason why I wanted to do that was it was a full circle moment, I suppose, for me, kind of going back, getting a qualification and like I had a group of 22 people that I studied with, and I remember going in and feeling for the first year and a half, I'm different than you. I have an addiction, and really there was a lot of shame around that kind of piece, even through the course, but they're part of the reason why I'm able to speak out today about it because they never treated me any different, the people that I studied with. If anything, over time, I learned that, okay, well, what I'm sharing here and the parts I'm sharing, this is actually educating and it's helping them to understand what it's like for someone an addiction to gambling and that. And they were huge champions for me, along the 4 year journey and beyond. So, I owe a lot to them too yeah, it took a lot of the stigma and shame out of it for me, by just people, yeah, accept me for who I was. And I suppose I find me finding who I was. But the article, like Barry, I've had people haven't seen in 15 or 20 years send me a message that they'd either a loved one that's been to treatment, Hope House, or somebody who's impacted by gambling. I've had friends, similar age to me, male, who reached out to me and who have had problems with gambling in the past. And I even had a friend who rang me and said that they sat down, had their morning coffee, read my article, and deactivated their betting account. So I know that the article, the idea of it was is that it was hopefully it was real, it was honest, that it would resonate with people. And it's not all about me, me, me. It's also talking about the people who are impacted by it and that, that there is help out there, recovery is possible, but there is we need more people talking about it. We need a lot more protection in society around it. And it's yeah, no, it's heartwarming, I suppose, for me to know that it's had impact, and hopefully we continue to have and podcasts like this and all the other supports that are out there, that there is help there for people, but as we know, yeah, in particular with gambling, that there's an awful lot of people that are, said in trouble with this that fortunately aren't either ready or, to seek support. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just before we finish up,
Yeah.
any last thoughts or questions from you? Claire, for Dan?
You know, Dan just reminded me of an assignment due because we actually take some of the same classes.
Yeah, and it was due. What was it? It was the lectures for that I think finished in April, and yet the due date for this is until the end of June. And I don't know about you, or it starts in July or something. I haven't started yet, Claire. If that helps you at all. Yeah.
Way ahead of you, Dan.
Yeah, and sorry, go on.
No, no, no. Look, Dan and I, our paths cross quite a bit, and it's nice to have someone who's in the same line of work, kind of similar experience, and kind of heading in the same direction, I think. So it's really lovely to have you on here today and to listen to you talk about your story. So thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, and you made a really good point there, and I've seen it a lot with Tony and other people over the years. That when people go public and they share their stories, the people start coming out of the woodwork, for want of a better term, and yet like that, people you haven't seen in 15, 20 years or
Yeah,
anything
yeah,
like that. I saw you, heard your story, or read your story,
yeah,
excuse me, and then people start having conversations that they wouldn't normally have, and then some people start seeking help who might not
yeah.
have sought help otherwise. So it's really, really important.
And in fairness, just to your reference there, like he did give me a ring actually, and that is why I would have a great time for Tony, and he did kind of, if you're doing this just to be of what, and I really appreciated that, and as well because of course there was the worries as to how will this be received. You are exposing yourself to the when once it's in print it's there, you know what I mean,
Yeah,
and that as well. So he was, and I said himself and Oisin yourself, there's lots of people out there that are doing great work in this area and beyond, in this, and I suppose I kind of want to be part of that shift and change, and that's to play some sort of a small part in that as well in regards, within our own community. Like this is something, not just gambling and addiction in general, like it's ravaging communities across the country, It's a lot deeper, I think, than any of us even realize. The figures and stats that come out. I take some of them with a pinch of salt because I think it's a lot deeper than that. And hopefully, as I said, with the you think, legislations, regulator, all this kind of stuff that we can start, it's only a starting point. There's an awful lot of work to do, but I'd hope to just try and play some sort of small part in trying to make some sort of a difference, because that's why I've done the article. That's why I'm putting myself out there. Is that I kind of really passionate about us trying to kind of make a safer space for for us and also for younger people, which I think are a huge target of a lot of this now. Yeah.
yeah, fair play. Serenity therapy, do you have an office or is it all online or?
Yeah, no, sorry, I rent a space and it's called the Mishnock Centre in Moat. So there's a lot of counselling psychotherapists rent rooms in there. It's a lovely kind of space and community. So I work out of there. I do work again, full circle moments. I'm back in the college now in a different role. I work with students in the counselling service there as well, and I do work with a couple of the family resource centres in Athlone and in Ballymahan. So I'm kind of scattered a bit, but my private practice is here remote, and I do some work online as well, But I suppose I set up the practice in January called Strategy Therapy, and we're since 6 months, and it's building, it takes time and a lot of I suppose time and effort goes into setting up a small business and that as well, but yeah, no, I really enjoy it. I love the work that I do, and it's not just with gambling. It's across the board, and it's great to be, to have gone into that area. I really enjoy it.
And do you have a website or how
Oh,
people
sorry,
get in touch
yeah,
with you?
yeah. So, yeah, www.serenitytherapy.ie, and you can find me on Instagram and Serenity Therapy Ireland, and on Facebook it's Serenity Therapy, and that as well. And if anything, if anyone even in regards signposting as well, it's or it's not just about from the client perspective. It's just if people are looking for our loved ones or any questions, I'd love so please reach out.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
All right, Dan, thanks a million for coming on today. Really appreciate it. And thank you, listener, for tuning in and tune in next time.
thank you very much.
Bye.